Roger will pop in, I'm sure.
Yeah, Roger's a late comer.
Everybody healthy? I know, that's why I went like that.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Eileen, are you going out to Denver? Did I read you going out to Denver or not? So you're not, because you mentioned the first note, you mentioned you were going to go out there.
You might
Wow. Are you guys gonna have to wear masks throughout the whole meeting? They're gonna have to wear a mask throughout the whole meeting? Really?
I think they are.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Member Brown,
Yes, ma'am.
Member Mendelson,
Yes.
Member DeMoss,
Present.
Member Adwar.
Adwar. You have to say it.
Member Bowden, Member Bowden,
Here.
Vice Chairperson Goldenberg,
Present in person.
Chairperson Axelrod,
Present.
Town Attorney Rubin,
Present.
Town Planner Allen. Thank you.
Okay, please rise to the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, are there any additions or deletions to the agenda today? Okay, hearing none, I call for a motion to accept the agenda as presented.
I so move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, for those who are going to give testimony today, would you please raise your right hand so they can be sworn in?
By the authority vested in me as a notary of the state of Florida, do you swear or affirm that the testimony that you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you.
I don't believe there are any public comments that are not related to any of the businesses, so we will pass on that and go on to the approval of the minutes. Are there any corrections to the minutes of September 10th, 2020?
I make a motion to approve as presented.
Second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, there being no unfinished business, We'll move on to new business. The first order of new business is a development order application number 20-0010 by Stuart Alston. It's an amendment to a previously approved site plan application number 18-0550 in order to add a corresponding landscape plan not included in the previous site plan approval plan set for the property located at 2352 South Ocean Boulevard. Do any of the board members have any ex parte communications to disclose?
Negative.
Nobody saying that? At this time, I now open the public hearing, and Town Planner Ingrid Allen, please present your recommendations regarding this.
Good morning. I believe the applicant for this item is not here. I know that the town clerk is trying to reach out to them. They were advised of this meeting. So I don't know if the board would like to just move this. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, thank you, guys. I'm sorry. The town clerk had come in and told me, we don't have anyone from this, for this item. Good. I'm glad you're here. Very good. Very good. Okay, so then we'll move along. Thank you. So I thought I would start off this item with a brief history as to how this application actually came before the board today. On July 20th, 2017, the town entered into a landscape inclusive maintenance agreement with the Florida Department of Transportation. And this is really for the purpose of maintaining landscape improvements on State Road A1A. Anytime you add new landscaping improvements, you have to amend that original agreement from 2017. And that amended agreement comes from the Florida Department of Transportation. So what had happened is the Florida Department of Transportation submitted to the town an amended agreement for the Olson residence at 2352 South Ocean Boulevard. Now, before the amended agreement can go before the town commission for them to consider whether they want to approve that amended agreement, we need to be sure that we have a landscape plan approval on file. So when I received the amended agreement, I went to the latest and greatest site plan approval for this property, the Olson residence. They did receive a site plan approval from the planning board for a new residence on August 8th, 2018. However, when I looked at the plan set that was approved by the planning board, which by the way, I did attach to your staff report, I noticed that there was not a landscape plan within that plan set. There was a site plan approval, there were floor plans, et cetera, but no landscape plan. Which is why the applicant is before you today. As I said, we need to have a landscape plan approval on file so that way we can have the item, the amended agreement go before the town commission for consideration of approval. We can move this whole item forward. Now, be mindful that section 30-33 of the town code states that an application for development approval, which includes a site plan approval for single family residences, which is the Olson residence, requires a landscape plan. So the code requires that if you're coming for a site plan approval, one of the the plan set has to include the landscape plan. Actually, I thought we could go ahead to slide number 3. This actually shows the landscape plan. Slide number 4 actually shows the irrigation plan as well. The landscape plan is consistent with Chapter 28 of the Town Code. These are the landscaping and the xeriscape provisions of the Town Code. And I also want to advise the board that the Florida Department of Transportation does agree with the installation of these landscaping improvements in their right-of-way. I'm sorry, actually, you might want to go back to slide number 2. This is an aerial of the Olson residence, just to familiarize the board with the property. I'll be glad to answer any questions that you might have.
Eileen?
Can you not hear? No, can you turn?
Oh. I'm sorry. I wanted a map that wasn't as zoomed in. I want to see where it is in Highland Beach. I just don't know exactly where it is.
Well, that is the aerial. We typically include an aerial. I don't know if maybe Teresa could do a quick Google Maps. You want to see like a street view?
I wanted to, but it's not that important. It's okay. I just thought maybe there was one.
Yeah, we typically do.
Okay.
Again, that property, I believe there's a fence, so you may not be able to see too much from the street. I remember correctly, I think there's a fence there with that green type of covering.
Is this the north end of?
It's
the town?
north, it
It's
is
the north
north.
end, yeah, the north end, 2300.
Yeah, I have seen construction, so it's probably, okay.
Ingrid, are there any new palm trees being planted in front of the building as part of this plan?
Okay, actually, you know what? I'll have the landscape architect go through
Okay.
that. There are several palm trees, and if you look at the plan, it does call out several. I'll defer that question to
Okay,
the applicant. I'm
that's
sure
fine.
they'll be happy to address that for you.
Okay, I know there are. I have a question about that. Okay. Are there any other questions for Ingrid? Well, any of the staff? Okay. And the applicant, please give your name and please give us, you can present.
I believe your mic has to go on.
Is this better?
Yeah. There you go.
My name is Dave Bodker. I'm the landscape architect. My address is 601 North Congress Avenue, Delray Beach, Florida. I just want to point out that originally in 2018, we did submit a landscape plan. In fact, I talked before this board with the architect, Stuart Brenner, at that time. I'm not sure why it wasn't in the set of plans, but I just wanted to point that out. In fact, we have a plan that's on the job site that was stamped by the city as having been received. So this morning I'm representing Stuart Olston Residence and J.H. Norman Construction. Jeff Norman is in the audience with us today. Most of you guys know him, I believe. Jeff, could you play? So this is A1A here, South Ocean Boulevard, and we are proposing royal palm in front of our exterior wall in the public right-of-way, in the DOT right-of-way. And as Ingrid mentioned, we do have DOT approval on this plan. What's waiting is for your approval of this plan and then you forwarding the approval to DOT, and that's all that remains to get that permit. Between the royal palms along here, I'm proposing Japanese blueberry trees. Underneath them is Trinette, and underneath the royal palms is dwarf Ixora. There's also a little green island picus hedge that wraps around and kind of frames these two beds. Against the wall, ecclesia hedge is proposed. So that's along here. And the hedge is proposed to go in at 8-foot height. The vehicular entrance to the site, which is right in here, is flanked by 4 Sylvester date palms. So they're represented on the plan in these locations. They are lushly underplanted with iris and liriopy.
Excuse me, sir, can you speak into the mic?
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
This math is about to. Let's see. In front of the garage building here, we are proposing that Confederate jasmine be espaliered to the wall. And then there is a dwarf Ixora hedge in front of that, ground cover in front of that. And then across this parking area, there's a magnolia tree proposed. The magnolia tree has 2 accent trees on either side. And those little trees are gardenia standards. There's another tree at the termination point of the parking area, and that is a rainbow eucalyptus tree. That's represented with this. In front of the motor court, right in here, is another magnolia tree, and there are bougainvillea standards on either side of that. That planting bed is filled with ground cover. And then flanking the walkway up to the house are topiary cones. And there's a little courtyard to the side that also has dwarf Ixora in it. The north and south sides of the house are treated the same. There's fishtail palms that are installed at 18-foot height. And then periodically, about 20 foot on center between the fishtail palms, there are Montgomery palms, and those will be installed around 30 foot high. Let's see, the back of the property, which faces intercoastal, will have 3 coconut palms on either side, on the north and south sides. And clusia hedge is proposed underneath those palms. And then between the pool deck and the pool and the intercoastal or the seawall there are 3 more Sylvester date palms, and they're underplanted with bromeliads. There's 2 cutouts in the pool deck, and they have Christmas palms planted within them. And that kind of wraps up the planting design. If you have any questions, I'm glad to answer.
Yeah, I have one question. Are there any of the electrical wires affected in any way by those royal palms? Are there wires going across? Because about 2 years ago, we went through this whole thing, and FPL, there was a request to keep at least the trees away from the wires. So I don't know, are there any wires there that you should be concerned with?
No, I don't think so. We have a transformer on our property right in this corner, so I think anything that was coming in there is underground.
Okay. Eileen?
Yeah, I was just curious. You said you got DOT approval.
Yeah.
And we've been advised, we got something from the town saying that the state is going to do our street soon, like 2023 or 4 or something like that. And that everybody who has anything planted in the right of way, they're going to lose it. The only reason I'm asking is because we, at Toscana, we have like all this stuff planted in the right of way. So does your approval mean that when they do that, they won't destroy what you have in their right of way when they do the road? I'm just curious. It's like an interesting thing to me.
First, let me point out that our planting, here's the existing path, the walkway that you have up and down South Ocean.
Yeah.
And our planting is well beyond that,
No, okay.
closer to the wall.
Okay.
It is, however, still in the DOT right away. I can't imagine DOT, and this is just my summation, is that I can't imagine DOT is going to go that far into the property.
Okay, because
But I could tell
they
you this.
advised us that they could. And
Yeah,
so,
DOT can do whatever they want in their right away.
Okay, right.
But I don't see them going that far back on the other side of your walkway and that kind of thing. But
Okay.
that's just, they have the right to do whatever they
Okay.
want to do.
I was just curious as to whether if they approved something now, knowing they were doing that, whether that was a grandfathering that if they wanted to go that far into the right of way, they couldn't. But you're basically saying that's what I was curious about. If they had given you permission to do this, then they came in and they said, you know what, we do want to go that far into the right of way. Your stuff is gone. I just wondered if your approval today would somehow make that not be able to happen, but.
That would be
Okay.
an extremely tough
Yeah,
fight
right,
with DOT.
okay.
So
Okay, curious.
John?
My
John?
question relates to
We lost you.
whether it's possible that maybe
You raise your-
that landscaping area in the front would still be all right if they delayed that until they finish up construction and put.
John, we
John,
can't
your
hear you.
mic
Can
is
you
low.
raise your volume a bit or something? We can't hear you.
You can't hear me. Right now, 1, 2, 3, you cannot hear me.
You could be louder.
Very low.
Okay, I don't know what to tell you. Let's see if we can. All right, let's let it go.
You can't get the volume up a bit?
I'm trying.
Okay,
How's that? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me?
barely, but go ahead.
Eric, can you hear? I'm on, gotta get it off automatic. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I took it off automatic. I have a jackhammer working in my building, so it's kind of a problem today. My question was, would it be permissible if they decided that they wanted to wait on putting in the landscaping that would be in danger, quotation marks, from FDOT until after the project was done? Would that be a permissible thing for them to do?
Anybody hear him?
Existing contract?
Did you hear the question? Somehow we have to get you louder, John.
Okay,
Okay. All right.
Chair, may I, it's Ingrid, may I
Yes.
just address one comment that the applicant made?
Go ahead.
Just for the record, the applicant did state that they submitted a landscape plan. And when I looked at the hard copy file, there was a landscape plan that was submitted into the building department. It was date stamped July 30th, 2018. So the applicant's correct, they did submit it. However, it was not included in the plan set that the board approved. So I just
Oh,
want to make that
okay.
clear for the record.
Okay. I don't believe there are any public comments regarding this subject. Does
I
anybody?
have one question.
Yeah,
What about runoff mitigation? You're handling all that? I mean, we're having an issue on A1A as it is with the driveway and so forth.
You said runoff drainage?
Yes.
We're controlling all our water runoff on the property. We have a full drainage system. By the town, inspected by the town and independent engineers. So we're keeping all the runoff.
great.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, he's not speaking into the mic.
Okay. Is there any other comments by anybody on the board? Any other questions?
They didn't hear
They-
your
they didn't.
comment. Can you please?
I'm sorry,
repeat that?
repeat that, please.
Jeff Norman, the general contractor. Yes, we put a extensive underground drainage system on the property to maintain all our water runoff. It was designed by a civil engineer, inspected by the civil engineer of record, and approved by the town.
Thank you.
Okay, any other comments? Then I'll consider the public hearing closed. Is there a motion to approve or disapprove or conditions regarding this subject?
I make a motion to approve.
I'll
Second.
Okay. Roll call, please.
Vice Chairperson Goldenberg,
Yes.
Member Mendelson,
Yes.
Member Brown,
Yes.
Member DeMoss,
Yes.
Member Adwire,
Yes.
Member Bowden,
Yes.
Oh, I hear you now, John.
Chairperson Axelrod,
Yes.
motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Be nice to see it finished.
We'll now go to B, Development Order Application Number 20-0014. Richard Touchette. Applicant is requesting an amendment to a previously approved 10-post platform boat lift application number 39412 in order to increase the height of the boat lift for the property located at 1006 Grand Court. Do any members of the board have any ex parte communications No? Okay. At this time, I then open the public hearing. Town Planner Allen, please present your recommendations.
Okay, good morning again. So if the board recalls, this boat lift at 1006 Grand Court has quite a bit of history, which I have documented in the staff report, which is on page 55 of your packets. I would just like to briefly go through the now 3 planning board hearings regarding this boat lift. On February 8th, 2017, a 8-post, 40,000-pound capacity boat lift was approved by the planning board. If we can please go to slide number 24. The plans provided as part of this approval show the piling heights at 4 feet from the existing dock. So slide number 24. Oh, no, not quite. There you go, 24. Is that number 24? I'm sorry, it's slide number 24 on the PowerPoint, Teresa. Do you see it?
I can see the PowerPoint slide number, page number. Do you have the agenda packet number?
No, I do, but I actually referenced the number of the slide number on the PowerPoint should be slide number 24. Do you not see it? Hold on, I will be happy to pull it up. I'm showing slide number 24 is that February approval. Okay, well, it is on page 254 in your packets. Okay. Again, Teresa, I'm showing it on number 24 on this PowerPoint. Okay, well, I guess we'll work that out. Again, it's on page 254 in your packets.
Showing up.
On October 11th, which was the second planning board hearing, that was October 11th, 2017, the planning board approved 2 additional posts for a total of 10 posts. This is on page 288 and 289 in your packets. Here, Teresa has pulled up a aerial of the current lifts. I've put a little red arrow to show those pilings as they currently look. The third public hearing was on August 13th, 2020. If the board recalls, you did deny a request to increase the height of the boat lift pilings from 4 feet to 12 feet above the existing dock. Okay, here we go. This is, I can't see very well with this plastic. Does that say October? Thank you. Thank you. Yes,
Yeah.
that's the first one. You can see the post, we're approved at 4 feet. And then if you want to go to the second one, I'm showing it is on slide number 25. Right, there you go. And you could see on the top left in red, I've gone ahead, labeled it. It's the approved plans from the October 11th, 2017 meeting. It's on this slide, and then the next slide are the 2 plans that were approved. Then on August 13th, should be slide number 28, you'll see the plans that were denied by the planning board. That's the stop work order. If we can go to the slide 28, there we go. This was denied by the planning board. And then the request that is before you today, I'm showing it as slide number 30, Teresa. The request that's before you today is to increase the boat lift pilings from 4 feet, which again was approved back in 2017, to 7 feet. Now, this is again 3 feet higher than what was originally approved on February 8th, 2017, and it's 5 feet less than the previous application that was denied by the planning board on August 13th, 2020. The newly proposed plans are on page 87 and 88 of your packets. The applicant did receive Florida Department of Environmental Protection authorization for these new plans. When you look at the actual authorization correspondence from the Florida Department of the Florida Department of Environmental Protection, that starts on page 89 of your packets, it states, and I will read it verbatim, a separate permit or authorization from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers is not required for this boat lift. The town does not provide a maximum height for docks or lift pilings. If the board recalls, there is a definition in the town code in section 30-131 for boat lift, and that is defined as the bottom of the keel of any boat should not be hoisted greater than 1 foot above the minimum seawall elevation, and in no case shall the lift be higher than the superstructure of the boat when lifted. The applicant's request does comply with this definition. Now, section 30-68H1C states that mooring facilities, which does include boat lifts, will not deny the public reasonable visual access to public waterways. And section 30-68H4 also states that boat lifts shall not deny the adjacent property owners or public reasonable visual access to the public waterway. Now, these new plans that were submitted by the applicant were reviewed by ATM, which is the town's coastal and marine engineering consultant. Dr. Jenkins did go ahead and provide his report. In his report, he states, and I quote, based on the information provided, it is undetermined if the new reduced pile elevations are the minimum required to meet the intent of the structure. However, the elevations as proposed in the revised drawings are generally consistent with standard practice relative to pile height and overall structure elevation required for lifting of the designed vessel. And Dr. Jenkins is here as well today. If the planning board decides to approve the applicant's request, staff recommends that following approval by the planning board and prior to the initiation of construction, the applicant will be required to obtain a building permit from the Town of Highland Beach Building Department. The prior permit, which was number 39412, expired on May 30th, 2020. Plans submitted as part of the building permit shall reflect the North American vertical datum. And I'll be glad to address any questions the board might have.
Does anybody have any questions for Ingrid? Irene?
I have a question for Dr. Jenkins.
You want, no, right? Wait,
Oh.
can we hold on that?
Oh, we can't, okay.
Yeah,
No,
this is
I don't-
Ingrid, then we go to the, we'll get to them
No, I want-
in their presentation. Ingrid, I have two questions. First of all, in August, this board denied a request for the 12-foot pilings. There was then a filing of a letter informing Mr. Touchette that he had to reduce those pilings or remove those pilings. And that went forward until this new offer was presented. I would like to know why, considering that we had basically voted down the 12-foot, that at least the town did not require Mr. Touchette to cut these things down to 7 feet, which is what he's requesting today, for two reasons. Number one, that we could see that, and number two, that the residents who are complaining and still complaining as we will go on, have continued to see 12-foot, not 7-foot poles. And that's my real question. Why? I mean, I think this is a personal feeling, but I think that it would have been behooving of Mr. Touchette to dealing with his neighbors to have those cut down to the size which we are required, that we're discussing today.
Thank you for the question. So if you look at the notice of violation that was provided by the building official, it's on page 74 of your packets. It clearly says that they need to remove the boat lift and associated structure pilings. They had 30 days from the date of that letter.
Correct.
Now, again, I'll just give you a brief overview of the process. So once the applicant received this notice of violation, right, they submitted a letter requesting that they postpone, that the building official postpone that violation because they were putting together their new development application. They were proposing to reduce the height of the pilings. They showed us that they did receive Florida Department of Environmental Protection approval. They showed us their revised plans, draft form of it. So based on that, the building official then suspended, right, the notice of violation. So the notice of violation says remove the pilings. It doesn't say go ahead or it doesn't say or cut down the pilings based on what your new proposal will be. It doesn't say that. Again, the applicant wants to get approval for a revised piling height. So that is the direction that was given in the notice of violation. And so I think it's reasonable to wait for the applicant to get approval to reduce those piling height by the planning board if the planning board so wishes to do that.
Any other questions for Ingrid? Roger? Roger?
Ingrid, my question is, I'm trying to understand what you were explaining before about the difference in the heights. So when you look at the current pilings, they're 12 feet above what?
The existing dock.
12 feet above the existing dock. And they previously were approved for 3 feet above the existing
No,
dock. And now they're
4
looking
feet
to make
above the
it
existing dock.
previously approved for 4 feet above the existing dock, and now they're looking to approve it for 7 feet above the existing.
Correct.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I understood that.
May I also add one more thing, Chair, to your question earlier? When you look at the August 13th minutes, which is included in your packet, actually it's on page 409, there was quite a bit of discussion by the board at the August 13 meeting about the applicant possibly coming in with a new application. Actually, the town attorney, agreed that they can come in with a new application. So I just want to put that on the record as well, that the board did discuss possibly the applicant bringing in a revised pilot.
Well, I understand that.
Yes.
I just think that it would have been behooved for being neighborly to hit, he knew that we disapproved of the 12-foot, correct? And now he's coming at 7 feet. It would have behooved him to cut those down so they didn't stay there as a 12-foot.
I
That's,
understand.
as I said, this is the personal
Yeah.
thoughts on that matter, not that necessarily thing. Are there any other questions for Ingrid? John, did you have a question? No?
David,
Okay.
David?
Yeah.
If I may.
Okay.
Ingrid, on like several instances, it calls for, now this is multifamily low density considered, right?
That's correct. It's the RML zoning district,
Okay,
right?
which
Multifamily.
means the setbacks and things of that nature do not apply.
That is correct. The code
Okay.
is, right, there's
It's
no side
amazing
setback.
how they say in their information, like on page 61, they comply with this and they don't comply with that one. It doesn't even conform. Okay. Just want to make
Okay.
reference to that.
Are there any other questions for Ingrid? Okay, is there anybody here from the applicant to make a presentation?
Excuse me, Chairperson Axelrod.
Yeah.
I have to actually swear the applicants and public comments, people that are giving public comments in.
Okay.
So Teresha's gonna take a moment to pull those people up on the screen so that I
Okay.
can do that. Thank you.
David, can I
You want to ask
Mr. Jenkins a question?
what?
Can I ask Dr.
Yeah.
Jenkins?
No, he's going to make we'll make a
Is
presentation
that part of
and then we'll
the?
get to the, you get to ask
Well-
questions of the presenters, et cetera.
Okay.
Can come here. Sorry, baby.
There-
Okay, can you all please raise your right hand? By the authority vested in me as a notary of the state of Florida, do you swear or affirm that the testimonies that you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Thank you, Teresha.
Okay. And as with the applicant, which one of the, who's going to make is there somebody going to make a presentation?
I'll be making a presentation. This is Ellie Zacharias to name Miskell Backman, 14 Southeast 4th Street in Boca Raton. Can we pull up the PowerPoint, please?
Would you
Ms.
please
Zacharias,
speak?
speak for a second so we can get the volume.
Can you hear me?
Can you say something else, please?
Can you hear me? Good morning.
Okay, that's as loud as it's not. It may be on her end. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I don't know if you heard me earlier. Can we pull up my PowerPoint presentation?
She's in the process of doing that.
Oh,
Thank you.
perfect. I'm sorry. Thank you.
No problem, Hank.
Ms. Zacharias,
Can you
talk
say
again,
something,
please.
something else, please?
Say something.
Good
Say
morning.
something.
Good morning. Hello.
Okay,
We can hear you better.
we can hear you now.
You know, I'm Greek, so most people don't usually have a hard time hearing me. I'm quite loud, or so I've been told.
Here you go.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Again, good morning. I'm Ellie Zacharias. I'm here this morning on behalf of the applicant and owner of the property at 1006 Grand Court. Next slide, please. This is the property location. I'm sure you all know it quite well. Next slide, please. Ingrid did a great job going through the background, so I'm just going to go through this really quickly. In February 2017, we came before this board, not me personally, but the previous attorney, for a request for an 8-post platform boat lift. That request was approved. Shortly thereafter, in October of 2017, they came forward again for an amendment to that previous approval for a 10-post boat lift. That also was approved. What's before you now is really a result of a stop work order. So there was some issues and the plans were not clear, and that was 100% our fault, and we apologize again for that. But it inferred that the post lift height would be 4 feet, which was not the case. So next slide, please. Ultimately, the posts were constructed at 12 feet. We came before this board on August 13th of 2020 to secure approval for those existing 12-foot height post lifts. That proposal was denied. Next slide, please. So what we're here before you today is to request an amendment to, again, the existing approval for the 10-post lift so that the height of the lift pilings will be 7 feet. So it will be 3 feet above that 4, but 5 feet less than what exists today. Next slide, please. And I'm going to reiterate this a few times in my presentation. And I heard from one of the board members earlier about location and setbacks and the like. The only issue before this board today is the height of those pilings. Everything else is approved. The location of the pilings, the number of the pilings, and the boat lift itself has been approved. So the only issue at hand today, this morning, is the height of those pilings. Next slide, please. This is the proposed site plan. This is unchanged. There is no change from this proposed site plan from what was approved in 2017. Next slide, please. So here you're going to find the change that is before you. So in lieu of 4 feet or 12 feet, what we're proposing is that 7-foot height for those boat lift pilings. Next slide, please. Okay, again, I warned you, the theme of my presentation, the issue at hand is those pilings. As Ingrid correctly noted, the code does not provide a maximum height for those pilings. Next slide, please. She's confirmed that this morning, and it's also denoted within your staff report. Next slide, please. So below, you'll see the code section with regard to, again, the height is not defined, but it does define boat lifts. And it defines it as the bottom of the keel of any boat shall not be hoisted greater than 1 foot above the minimum seawall elevation. In no case shall the lift be higher than the superstructure of the boat when lifted. Next slide, please. Our proposal complies with the town code. We meet that section of the code. Next slide, please. Further in your packet, we had Mr. Peter Gimple, who is an expert in the field. He's a naval architect trained in yacht design, and he opined on the term superstructure and the height of the boat lift. He concluded in his analysis, and this was with the 12-foot height of those pilings and not the 7-foot that is before you, but I still think it is pertinent considering we're lowering, not increasing. But he did say that we do meet the definition within the code, within the town's code. Next slide, please. I'm sorry, I read ahead of myself. Next slide, thank you. So as such, again, based on your code and our experts' evaluation of the code, we do comply. Next slide, please. So in Ingrid's very thorough staff report, again, thank you. She does denote other code sections as well that apply. So I do want to spend just a little bit of time going through that. Section 3068H of the town code really talks about boat lifts. Next slide, please. 3068H1C denotes that it shouldn't create hazard and interference with navigation. It should not endanger life or property or deny the public reasonable visual access to public waterways. Next slide, please. 3068H4 almost mirrors H1C. Next slide, please. So I'm going to go through this one by one. So first and foremost, again, the only issue before you is the height of the existing already approved 10 posts. So as ATM correctly noted, the location's already been approved. So clearly navigation, if was an issue, it should have been discussed when we came before you for our 8-foot post. Our 8 posts and then again before you for our 10 post. Mr. Jenkins went on to say that the boat lift was previously approved in this location. So hence navigation is a moot issue at this juncture. Next slide, please. With regard to endangering life of property, again, we're just before you for the height. So this issue does not pertain to us. Next slide, please. I want to spend just a little bit of time on reasonable access to public waterways. Yes, your code obviously says that reasonable visual access shall be provided. Every property owner with our proposal will continue to have that reasonable visual access. I looked up Miriam because reasonable is not defined in the code. So I did look up Miriam definition, the definition in the Miriam for reasonable, and it defines it as fair, sensible, and moderate. I also looked up reasonable in legal terms, and it means just, rational, appropriate, ordinary, or usual in the circumstances. The town code does not say unobstructed, unimpeded, or any of those words. And in fact, if my client was to dock a large boat in that exact location, the visual access would be the same. Next slide, please. I wanted to provide a little diagram here to show how each property will continue to have access to reasonable visual access to waterways. As you can see, every single property will have water views. My client is not 100% obstructing or impeding reasonable visual access to the waterways. Next slide, please. Ingrid already noted on this point, but I think it bears repeating. ATM, which is the town's expert that they've hired to review our plans, stated, and I quote, "The elevations as proposed in the revised drawings are generally consistent with standard practice relative to pile height and overall structure elevation required for the lift of the design vessel." They did say prior to this that we did not show the necessity for this height. I've gone through your code very thoroughly. I see nothing in your code that requires me to provide a necessity. But nonetheless, I do think it is, again, worth repeating that he says this is standard practice relative to pile height and overall structure elevation. So while he previously said they haven't proved necessity, he later then says this is standard practice. So with that, both our expert and the town's expert, again, that the town has hired to review our plans, have concluded that the proposed height is in fact consistent with town code and standard practice. Next slide, please. And this holds true with our neighbor across the way. We actually have our surveyor on the phone who can verify this. They went and did a survey. There are, in fact, right across the waterway, there are 3 pilings that are 6.56 inches, 6 feet 50, and then 2 that are 6 feet 83 inches. So again, this is not something uncommon in this, in fact, exact waterway as we see it right across the way. And Louisa, if we can allow her to confirm that, she is the surveyor of record. Louisa, are you there? Hi.
Hello.
Can you all confirm what you found on your visit across at the condominium with regard to the pilings?
Sure. Okay, so, oh, wrong survey. I'm sorry. Okay, here it is. All right, so I guess you don't have a copy of the survey, but going from north to south, we, how many piles there are? What do we get? Five piles. 5 wood piles, They are roughly 156 feet across the canal. The heights are going down the line. This is all in NAVD 88. Starting at the north going south, 6.56, 6.83, 6.83, 6.56, and 6.56.
Those are mostly guide piles, are they not? Hello.
Hello?
Aren't they mostly guiding piles versus for a lift?
Yes. They are along the dock. They're along the wood dock. Or plastic, I'm sorry.
Next slide, please. Again, our proposal complies with each and every section of the town code. The only issue before you is the height, which we have shown exists already within this waterway. Next slide, please. These are all the sections of the code that apply to boat lifts and marine facilities, and we comply with all of them. And with that, next slide, we're here to answer any questions you may have.
Before we ask any questions, is there anybody else who has any presentation to make regarding this subject from the presenter? Okay, that being said,
What about, David, can I,
um,
I've got a couple videos. Can we show those?
sure.
I
Oh, wait,
think
let's
we
wait,
should
let's wait on
question-
that.
We'll wait.
I think we should question the questioner while it's questioning.
Yeah, absolutely, go ahead.
Okay. Hi. I have a couple questions on your presentation. So the only thing I would zero in is, I see that you comply with, you did a very good job of giving all of our codes and relating how you comply to them. But I think your presentation with regard to reasonable visual access is a conclusion that I can't reach by what you said, okay? Because I'm also a lawyer and I know that reasonable under the law is reasonable under the circumstances, which is always defined by a court because different people have different ideas about what's reasonable. And so obviously this board in 2017, when they gave the approval, said that 4 feet above was reasonable because the visual access they concluded was reasonable. 12 feet they concluded was not reasonable. And so here we are at 7 feet, okay? And I don't think that we can just say you've complied with that because you deem it to be reasonable because there's somebody across the street who may not have the same visual access issues, okay? So I'm wondering if, has there been, and I know we've asked this before, has there been any outreach to the community to find out what they would accept as reasonable? Because we know they'll have had to have accepted 4 feet as reasonable, and they didn't have to accept 12 feet as reasonable. And I'm trying to figure out, you've quoted our expert. I haven't had a chance to question him yet, but I plan to, that it's not necessary, but it seems to be like a standard thing. And I have to question him. But I'm just wondering if you've gone to any kind of community outreach to figure out what your neighbors think is reasonable, even though you might not think it's reasonable, but that's where, that's the whole idea of what's reasonable. So that's my question.
No, we have not met with the neighbors to determine their definition of reasonable. No, we have not.
The things that you were going to do
Right.
when you first got on board, representing Ms. Torset.
We were gonna do that with a 12-foot, that is accurate, but clearly the board denied that application, denied my request for postponement to go speak with the board. With other 7-foot pilings within the same waterway, we believe that that is in fact reasonable, and that a court of law would also find it reasonable when we have the same height pilings across the way, in the same waterway.
And I would also say that 7-foot pylons, but you have a 1.5
That's what I was going to say.
foot and a half lift that will be on top of that. So it'll be 8.5 feet versus 7.
On, excuse me, Mr. Goldenberg, on detail number 1, if you can go to that. It says the overall height with the motors will be 8 foot 6 inches. So it's not 7, 8 foot 6. It's actually what the obstruction will be to visual. Is that correct?
Is that a question for me?
Yes.
Yes, so that is accurate. Pilings are going to be measured by the height of in the actual piling, which is why both your third-party reviewer, ATM, also denoted their 7 feet. That is how they are measured.
But you are getting another foot, basically another 1.5 feet above that for visual interference, so to speak.
I'm Richard Touchette. Can I say something, please?
Yeah, Mr. Tushman.
I'm the owner. Can I say something?
Yes, absolutely.
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Touchette.
Okay, the obstruction will be the boat itself. That will be, what will be seen is the boat, not the pilings, not the boat lift. So even if there was no boat lift, a big boat there would be the obstruction, but my boat will be a small boat. And this is what you'll see, not the boat lift.
Eileen?
But the boat will be higher up than it would have been at 7 feet. It'll be higher up. You'll see the boat higher up
It's
to
about
8.5 feet,
13
right?
feet above the dock.
Eileen, at this point, maybe we should have Mr. Jenkins come in
Well,
and get
Dr.
involved
Yeah,
in this
Dr. Jenkins,
situation because we have some questions.
Yeah,
Jenkins, could
we
you
do.
please come up to the,
yeah.
do you have anything as a prepared presentation or anything like that? Or would you just like to answer questions?
Well, first, for the record, my name is Dr. Michael Jenkins. I'm Coastal Engineering Principal with Applied Technology and Management, and here as the as a technical expert for the town. My address is 11814 59th Street North, Royal Palm Beach, Florida 33411. I'm not here to provide any presentation, just to answer any questions or clarifications that I can regarding.
If it's okay with Miss Zacharias, can we go ahead and ask questions of Mr.
Yes,
Jenkins?
yes, that would be great. Thank you.
Excuse me.
Dr. Jenkins.
Hey, everybody calls me Mr. Axel also. Okay, Eileen, do you want to, I have
Yeah.
public, but go ahead.
Okay, so I just want to understand, like, it was a long time ago, I wanted to ask you that, but Ingrid quoted a part of your report, and it seemed to me a little contradictory or conflicting. It was like, yes, this is what it is, but no, it's, or yes, it's, no, it doesn't do this, but yes, it's customary. I would just like to hear your own words, your opinion about this revised application, what you can, like, explain to us in lay terms what
I
you
understand,
mean.
and I would note that that it was not contradictory. It was I would phrase it as the level of confirmation that I provided.
Okay.
Okay, that's, it's not that I was saying it's black and white. I was
Okay.
saying I can provide a conclusion to this level regarding the height of the piles. I can't, and it has to do with level of detail. I'm not the engineer of record, right?
Okay.
I didn't look at, the exact height of, exactly how
Right.
high this boat is, exactly high. I didn't look, to that level of detail. I did look in terms of what is standard practice of what would be typically seen on a boat lift. And a
Okay.
boat lift of this height is fairly typical. There are multiple examples of it in South Florida. It's not an unusual height. The 4 foot that they originally asked for was not technically feasible. You could not do a lift with that height. It just was too low. The 12 foot, in my conclusion, if you recall, I said, that's pretty high. That's much higher than standard. I asked for more, more justification of that 12 feet because it's higher than what you typically see. But the current proposal is in line with what you typically see. There are multiple examples that you can look at regarding that. The one additional, since I have the floor, one additional point I would just make regarding pilings. Piling height is relative to what you're measuring to, right? And that's part of that. And in our discussion, we're doing it relative to elevation of the seawall, right? So we're the heights that were referenced in the presentation were relative to NAVD, National Atlantic Vertical Datum, which is not the seawall. So there's a bit of apples and oranges regarding the adjacent heights. But in terms of where we are, in a practical sense, the 4 feet doesn't work. The 12 feet is too high. 7's about what you would need. Keep in mind, they have to be physically tall enough to get the boat in and get it lifted. So that's really in line with what is pretty typically.
So in your opinion, 7 feet would be the right, if we said, oh, it can only be 6 feet, they would still have problems getting it in and raising it?
They very well could. I mean,
Okay.
I didn't do it that level of detail,
Okay, I
but
understand.
it really could be, you're really within that kind of range of,
Around 7 feet.
yeah,
Okay,
you can't,
got it.
4 definitely doesn't work. And you got to think, we're really at the level where you really literally do need to take into account what is the exact height of that boat and is there something else protruding higher? Because, we're really at that level of scrutiny regarding it.
So Dr. Jenkins, you're saying specifically for that particular boat, right? It should be that high.
We did not look at, just note that, part of the issue with boats is you have antennas, you have radar domes, you have other things that protrude above as well. You do want to have a buffer, some kind of safety in there. 7 feet is in line with what would be required to have a boat lift for a boat of this size.
Okay, do you consider the compatibility within a marina of what other structures are, other boat lifts are to be compatible with a small marina? Do you ever consider that aspect?
That, my opinion, is relative to function of that lift, of what would be required to have a lift to lift the boat that is intended to be lifted.
Okay.
So I'm not, I did not do any comparable to any other in this area or anything of that nature.
Gotcha.
Any other questions?
Yeah,
Eric?
I didn't understand what he said because what size boat is going in? He still hasn't purchased the boat.
48, it's supposed to be 48 feet, I believe.
And
That's
the
what the
picture I
presentation.
saw up there, since I live across the street, the picture there doesn't show the boats on the other side of Mr. Tatcha's property. They usually boats there, but due to the virus, the boats were taken away. Or they're not here yet. That will hinder the people that live to his left from getting out. It reduces the amount of space between going out, which is not right, and which his neighbors are complaining about. Also, the height of the boat. How high is it going to be? We don't know. We're asked to vote on something. It's not right. I also, the picture that she shows on the screen doesn't show any boats on the other side, but there are boats there.
Regarding my testimony, my understanding from the information provided that there was a specific boat that was intended. It was a 42-foot. I will defer to the documents and the applicant regarding that. testimony I'm providing today is specific to the issue of the height of the piles. The issues of navigation were addressed within a previous document and a previous presentation to this board. I would defer to staff and whether I should address that or not.
Ms. Zacharias?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Jenkins. I will defer to Mr. Touchette with regard to the size of the boat. But again, I think it is very important for me to remind this board that the only issue before you is the height of the pilings. Mr. Jenkins did an excellent job denoting that 4 feet for those lift pilings would not work, that 7 feet is standard practice. I think he said it's in line with what you typically see. It is what you would need, and that 4 feet would not be feasible. So again, I hear the board has concerns about other issues with regard to the location of these posts, but that has already been approved. The location of the posts are already there. The only issue before this board today is the height of the lift pilings. And again, your expert just said that that is standard and what you would need at that 7 feet.
Mr. Rubin, I have a quick question for you.
Yes, sir.
Is our approval dating back, the original approval, is there an expiration date on that?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
That's all I want to know. Wait, Roger, did you have a comment?
I did. I'm a boater. I'm a strong proponent of boat lifts. Mr. Touche he could very easily put in a floating boat lift. He could put his boat in and dock it up against whatever the seawall is. He can put in a variety of different boat lifts in that location. What I'm actually, I know that Ms. Zacharias, excuse me for pronouncing your name wrong. I know that Ms. Zacharias wants us to focus, or wants me to focus on only one issue of the height of the piling, but I kind of need to really focus on things as a whole. I understand that you want to direct my focus in that direction, but I tend to more look at things more from a whole. And I'm actually kind of perplexed as to why Mr. Touche wouldn't put the lift on the north side of his property rather than on the west side of his property, because actually navigation into the lift would be easier on the north side. It would be less obtrusive to the neighbors. On the west side, you've got all this huge groundswell of people that are angry and upset. And, I just don't understand the thought process, other than the fact that, that when he's correct and his attorney is correct, that, the boat will be the obstruction, not the height of the pilings or the motors on top of the pilings, but the entire obstruction is actually obstructed from his view by a bunch of areca palms at the distal end of his property, but yet it's in everybody else's face. On the north side, it would just, to me, I'm just kind of perplexed as to why he wouldn't put it there. I'm a strong proponent of boat lifts, and I think that this, a 40,000 pound lift is a really big lift, and it can handle a pretty significant boat. And I just want to just say that I can't just focus on that small little piece. And although I appreciate the fact that you're trying to direct the focus towards that, I just kind of have to look at it as a whole.
Mr. Chairman, let me just respond. Mr. Brown, I understand your concern and you're looking at it holistically, which I appreciate. The issue is, and it sort of follows up on what the chairman just asked me, they didn't get approval in that location. They have an approval. So I understand, you want to look at, and maybe it should have been somewhere else, and maybe in hindsight, hindsight's 2020, but it was approved in that location. So that is the issue that is before the board. The posts were approved, the location was approved. We're just talking about height. So I think that's what Ms. Zacharias was getting at. It was already approved in that location.
Mr. Rubin, a point of,
Yes, Ms. Mendelson.
it was approved in that location, I agree. It was approved at 4 feet.
Correct.
Query whether or not in 2017, when that board approved the location of the pilings at 4 feet, would they have approved 7 feet, 10 feet in that location, or would they have said, no, turn it around to the north or turn it around to the south? I mean, you can't take, the fact is, yes, they had that approval. Let them build it at 4 feet in that location. But to say that that board wouldn't have considered another location had they been asked for 7 feet, I don't think we can assume that.
I mean, I do understand what you're saying. Yes, they could build it at 4 feet right there, but I mean, I understand your point that maybe if it was taller, maybe that would have come into play. It's hard to say now, again, hindsight being 2020.
So I think we're being asked to do, like, in my way of looking at it, we're being asked to look at a new application, not an application that was approved at a location in 2017, and the only thing that's changing is the height. That's not what we're being asked. We're being asked to look at a new approval.
Well, they have an approval of 4 feet at that application. I mean, again, I understand what you're saying. So yes, if they kept it at the 4 feet, they could build it at that location. But I understand that you're saying, well, maybe it wouldn't have been at that location at 12 feet. And, you know, I see your perspective there.
But I've heard other boaters talking.
John? John?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
I have one question and one comment. In the presentation, they utilized the measurement on a number of pilings that are in the area, not on the property, showing the height of those pilings. My question, were those pilings ever approved by this town to be that high? That's my question. My second comment is one of the issues that we were explained about before was that there's some uniqueness about this vessel, and that is that it's got 3 engines and 1 engine is sort of low, so it provides a draft issue that it needs to be higher than many other vessels because of that center prop. Thank you.
Beverly, you have a comment? You have a comment?
Yes, I've been advised that Mr. Nutter joined the meeting at 10:27. Is it okay to join him in?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Are there any other comments regarding this subject?
I had a question, not a comment. The first part, I had a comment, but I had a question. Can I get an answer on the question?
Yeah, go ahead. Did you have a question, John?
The question was whether those pilings across the way that Ms. Zacharias referred to in her presentation were actually approved by the town. Was that your question, Mr. Bowden?
Yes, absolutely. Or are they something that shouldn't be there in the first place at that height?
So I don't know if Ingrid or a member of town staff can address that.
Sure, this is Ingrid. I really can't speak to pilings that are really not part of the application that's before you. That would be something that staff would need to research and look into. I don't know. I don't know if they were approved via the planning board or what have you.
And with regard to your latter question about Mr. Touchette's specific boat, I know your own expert mentioned that this is a standard height, and I think that would have come across irrespective of the type of boat that Mr. Touchette does or does not have.
That is not necessarily though the minimal height, as he did say in the expertise. It is not the minimal height that the pilings can be for his boat, correct? Do you have me? It's not the minimum height. It's a standard, but it's not the minimum height. And as he said it's the average height, but at the same time, he also said that 4 feet is too low 7 feet may be okay, but there's a distance between 4 feet and 7 feet also. Did you have something to say?
This is, so a bit confused. This is an amendment to an approved application already, or are we approving a new application?
It's still considered an amendment. I mean, to Ms. Mendelson's point, it's still considered an amendment because they have approval for pilings in those locations, but it's an amendment to, they're seeking, the application before the board today is to increase the height of those pilings from 4 feet to 7 feet above the dock.
Okay, so navigation wise, it matters not what the piling is, because the pilings are still going to be there, whether they're 4 feet, 18 feet, 12 feet, 7 feet, whatever, they'll still have the same navigation issue. So that really cannot come into play in this conversation.
Yes, they will still have the same navigation issue regardless of the height. And when the board's deliberate, you need to focus on the criteria in the code. And I think what Ms. Mendelson was saying was, you know, there is that reasonable visual access, you know, provision. So you have to decide, well, at that increased height, yeah, the board decided at 4 feet it was okay. At 12 feet at 7 feet, excuse me, does it still meet those criteria?
Any other comments? We're going to go on to public comments at this time. I believe we have one person in the room who's making public comment. That's Mr. Mazzella.
Yes.
If you come up, please make your comment.
Good morning. My name is Louis Mazzella. I'm the owner of 1009 Grand Court, and I also own the docks 4 through 7 and 20 on the other side of the lagoon. I'd like to remind this board that in 2016, you did give Mr. Touchette approval for the east-west access. If I could have his attorney pull up her PowerPoint to show you, there's a PowerPoint presentation showing his boat on the lift and showing the entire area. If Ms. Zacharias could pull that up, I'd like to show you in 2016 where you gave him approval. My board president was at that hearing and said the HOA would not give him approval for that. That's a different story, but you had originally give him approval on the east-west access, not on the north-south access. I have that paperwork. My attorney, Lauren Galvani, has that paperwork. Let's leave it right there, right now. Let's leave it there for a second. Section 68H1 and 68H4, 1CH4. Both of those talk about navigation. I can tell you right now, you have taken almost 16 feet away from me getting into my slips. You have taken away that. So you have wrecked my navigation at this point in time. It's impossible for me and the other boats to get a big boat in there. And I don't know who did that survey, but they were not there. I don't know what they did. I'm just going to say that was incorrect, because me as a boat owner, that is not correct. There's another one that goes back that shows just Mr. Touchette's boat on the lift. But if you look at his boat on the lift that they propose, that's correct. May I point out on this one, please? You had originally given Mr. Touchette the approval for right here. This is where you gave him approval.
It's off, Mike.
Then you came in.
Someone repeat that, please.
Yes, sorry. That work? Okay. Okay, in 2016, this town gave Mr. Touchette approval for right here. My board president came in, Mr. Lee Morris, and said the HOA would not approve it there. And the funny thing was, the town board member, two of you said to each other, is that a problem for us? And the other gentleman said, no, that's an HOA issue. We gave him approval for here. My attorney, Lauren Galvani, has this paperwork. Mr. Touchette likes to forget about this, but you did give him approval here. Now, when plans, papers, whatever were filed for this, I can tell you right now, you had problems with the mailings. I did not get my mailing for this till 2 weeks after. And when I came, I was told, well, we had a problem with the mailings, but we're deeming it okay. Now, I don't know how that was acceptable, and I don't understand how this is acceptable now. You've taken away 16 feet to the back of the marina. You've given it here. This is where it belongs. It does not belong here. Please, I'm begging you, don't ruin this little marina. Put it where it belongs.
Beverly, we have other people that we're going to Zoom on, or?
I have a question for that last witness.
Yeah, sure. why?
Okay, is it possible for you to provide this paperwork?
Yes, my attorney Lauren Galvani was actually in, I believe she testified in the last hearing.
Yeah, she did.
Right, that's
Okay.
my attorney. I asked her, I'm tired of spending attorney's fees.
Okay. is
So I
it-
asked her, I'm going to come
Okay,
today.
no, but is it possible for you to get the actual documentation so we could?
Yes, she
just
has
have-
it. I can certainly,
Okay.
I will ask her to provide it to the
So that
town,
if they
absolutely.
give it- if can circulate it.
That's fine, no problem with that.
Chairperson Axelrod, the
Yes.
public comments that we had holding are no longer there, so it's closed.
It's closed.
Yes.
Okay, is there any further discussion between the members of the
Yeah.
board? Jen?
Okay, I know nothing about boats. But all I can tell you is that as a lawyer, I'm looking at two relevant issues. One is that he has an absolute right to build a 4-foot, whatever it's called, dock in lift in that area. But if he doesn't like that now, he wants it to be any other feet but 4 feet. As far as I'm concerned, the board has to start looking at that now from where the pilings are, the location. So every time it changes, if it's not 4 feet, should the pilings be to the right or the left if it's 6 feet, to the right or the left or the back or the front if it's 9 feet? Like it changes every time you look at the height because the reasonable visual access and the ability to navigate or whatever you just said changes every time the height goes up, in my opinions, especially the reasonable access. And maybe at the end of the day, with a presentation that starts from the beginning of where the pilings are vis-a-vis how high it is, maybe at the end of that, we'll come back and conclude that 7 feet in this location is the best place. And maybe we won't, but we don't know that until we analyze it. And the constant thing here is that they had the 4 feet, then by themselves, they put up 12 feet. And now they're trying to amend it again and not give us all the full information. So I would not be in favor of this unless I could review the whole thing with boat people who are knowledgeable in where the pilings are versus how high it is. To me, they go together.
Mr. Jenkins, would you comment on her statement just now? Is that true that moving the pile, raising the pylon, does it have an effect on size, location, et cetera?
I believe the issue is whether this change, whether we are truly just looking at the height of the piles is really what it's
That's the
coming down to.
question, yeah.
And that's kind of where I think that's kind of where the deliberation is occurring. Regarding the issue of navigation, one other element that plays into that is what is in code is not explicit regarding that issue as well. So even in those discussions regarding, navigation and these, if you are going to open up, to a broader discussion regarding that, what is enforceable is what is in the code. The code is not particularly explicitly clear regarding that. So it does, there isn't a necessarily clarity relative to code regarding those issues as well. So, and I would defer to, my expertise is relative to, the technical elements of this, whether we're just looking at that or whether it's a broader discussion, I would have to defer to others in the conversation.
Roger, are you there? Comment on Eileen's just statement. Do you think that's true? I mean, you're our boater.
You know, from a navigation standpoint, I actually think that going into the lift from the location that it's been approved and currently seeking further approval, I think is actually much more difficult than going in the other way. One is going straight in and straight out, and the other one is having to make a right angle turn. And if the people across the way decide to have a larger vessel there where they have jet ski lifts, floating jet ski docks, I think it would present a serious problem.
The question that Eileen posed, though, is the fact that we're going from 4 feet to 7 feet, does that require us to look at, does it have an effect on where the piling should be, the location, et cetera?
I think that the height of the pilings going from 12 to 7, no, I don't think that that's the issue at hand. I still believe the issue is a global issue, not just the height of the pilings. And to have a lift there, I mean, in the last meeting, I believe I brought up the issue of, I went on the Palm Beach Property Appraiser's website and looked at, similar to what the gentleman that just testified talked about, the hindrance to navigation to the other properties. I brought that up as a question and thought of hindrance then. I still do. But the height of the pilings, I mean, if we're focused on only the issue of the height of the pilings, which, I don't think is the proper way to look at it. I don't think that would make that much of a difference, quite frankly.
But Roger, what about in the reasonable visual access? Where the pilings are at 7 feet make a difference in someone's visual access that they might consider reasonable if it were at 7 feet instead of 4 feet? If you changed where they were, those pilings, would that visual access change because it was now in a different place at a higher level?
Well, of course, the visual access will change. I mean, it all depends on the angle at which you're looking at it from. But the most obtrusive visual hindrance is going to be the boat itself, which has, the lift is just a mechanism to lift the boat. And yeah, maybe you'll see like the motors up high, and yeah, you'll see the pole up high, but after a while you just see the boat. And that's the biggest hindrance. But yeah, the difference between 7 feet and 4 feet, it makes a difference in the height of the boat, which makes a difference in the height of the hindrance, whether the boat is at 7 feet or 4 feet, no difference to the navigation. The hindrance to navigation is the same. Doesn't make a difference. But the visual is different between 7 feet and 4 feet and 12 feet. Of course, it's just the angle.
But is there a place, if you put the piling somewhere else, 7 feet, would it be less intrusive on the visual access than if you put the pilings where they are now that were approved at 4 feet and put those at 7 feet? Is there a better place? That's all I'm trying to figure out, because I couldn't support denying this if it just was what you were saying, that global is a global thing. It's a better place to put it somewhere else, because he does have an approval for this at 4 feet. And my issue is, if he built it at 4 feet, we would all go home. But my issue is, if he changes the height, does that change where would be a better place for the location of the pilings vis-a-vis navigation and visual access? That would be my only analysis.
In response, first of all, I've already been chastised by Mr. Rubin about focusing on the issues. So I'm going to try to respond as best I can. Whether the piles are at 4 feet, 7 feet, 12 feet, issues of hindrance to navigation are the same. It doesn't make a difference what the height is. It's still a hindrance to navigation. And yeah, and I mean, I've already made the comment that putting it on the north side of this property would be a more reasonably prudent decision to do. But he's already got approval for the location that he's at. And, you know, Mr. Touche could eliminate all issues of height and lift by putting in a floating dock, which he would have, and he wouldn't even need approval to do that, quite frankly. He could do that without approval. And he could put in a no profile lift, which wouldn't have any poles, any piles that would go above the platform at which the boat is sitting. So there's a lot of ways to be able to mitigate the issue of the height of the poles. Again, I still go back to, you know, and I don't want to be chastised again. I still go back to my position that I think it's a global issue, not just being narrowed down to the focus that Ms. Zacharias wants us to, and Mr. Rubin wants us to focus on.
Eric?
I still have a question whether this board's hands are tied in suggesting that he move the location of where he puts his boat, or are we able to say, because he wants this amended, that we are disapproving the whole application and that he has to come back to us with another application that would be less intrusive to the neighbors, and it's up to him about whether he can dock the boat easier or difficult. That's his issue. But Mr. Rubin, are our hands tied to a specific request just for the height of the pilings?
This board is considering, the application before you is just an increase to the height of the pilings. So, and I wasn't chastising you, Mr. Brown. You know, and I understand, you know, you want to look at this globally. I believe, you know, Ms. Mendelson made a good point. Yeah, maybe it would have been different. The board wouldn't have approved it there from the height issue, at least, if it was going to be 12 or 7 as opposed to the 4 that was approved. But you need to focus on the code requirements and what the request is before you. So the request before you is whether the increase from 4 to 7 meets the code. And yeah, visual access is one of the criteria in the code, but this issue of should it be on the north side, again, maybe it should be, but the application before you is just the increase from the 4 to the 7 for the pipe.
But if we do not approve the change in height,
if you don't approve the change in height, then he would have to remove the pilings, and he can come in with another application somewhere else in some other form. But that would be the applicant's choice.
Can I say something, please? It's the owner, Richard Touchette.
Go ahead. Go right ahead, Mr. Touchette.
Okay. My daughter and my son-in-law, they have a really big boat that they want to put there on the north side. If I would put my boat lift on the north side, then they would have to park the big boat where I'm making the application now. And nobody could prevent them to park their boat there, but it would be more, it won't be the best place to put that big boat. So
if I could add to this conversation, I hear what everybody is saying, and I have to say this for the record. It is clear that potentially there's buyer's remorse as to the location of this approved boat lift. Okay, I think we can all agree on that. This board would prefer this boat lift to be in a different location. I want to remind the board again that the only thing before you is the height of these pilings, and you can look at it globally if you want, but the application before you is the height of these pilings. With that, there has been some discussion on reasonable access. Mr. Brown noted a no profile lift that we could do as of right. with a no profile lift, and I am not a boater, so I muted myself and took off my video and discussed with David Nutter, who is here and can address this comment. A no profile lift would actually have the boat just as high as what we're proposing, number one. Number two, I believe Mr. Touchette has about 80 feet at that side of his property. If he put a 75-foot boat, and again, David could discuss this, a 75-foot boat today that he could park his boat as of right, it would be just as high as what Mr. Touchette is proposing with the lift. So with that, your discussion is about reasonable access. If you're arguing reasonable access, I think it's important to know, would someone's reasonable access be different than if he parked a 75-foot boat, which he can as of right on his property? Additionally, Mr. Brown noted a no profile lift. Would that be any different? And again, David, perhaps you could address this as well. But I hear the board and you all are having buyer's remorse, but this is not the issue before you. Navigation is not the issue before you. Mr. Jenkins has reviewed this application. If I'm not mistaken, this is his 4th time. He is the professional the town of Highland Beach has hired to review it. If navigation was an issue at application 1, at amendment 2, at amendment 3, which was denied, and this amendment, it would have been brought up, and it was not. So you can interject any issues you may want, but for the record, for potential appeal, I need to note that what is before you is the height of those lift pilings. Nothing more, nothing less. If you want to discuss reasonable access, I think we should have a discussion on the record, again, for appeal purposes, as to whether someone reasonable visual access would be any different with a 75-foot boat or what board member Brown said with a no profile lift. And I would like Mr. Nutter to discuss that on the record.
David,
I would like to respond to that, please.
go ahead.
Good.
Oh, Ms. Zacharias, I actually don't disagree with you from that perspective, and that's why I made all those comments. Mr. Touche can put in a floating dock and not get approval from the town because he doesn't need approval from the town to do that. He could put in a no profile lift, which would reduce the height of the poles, but his boat would still be at the same height. But he wouldn't have the higher poles. So my point that I was saying is that, whether it's 4 feet or 7 feet or 12 feet, it doesn't make a difference for where the boat is, but it still is a hindrance to the navigation, and there's still the view of the boat. So the boat is the actual true obstruction that is there, and the poles, because of the way he's got the poles laid out with a 10 pole lift to be able to support 40,000 pounds, those poles at those points are pretty large and obtrusive to the navigation, and that's the point that I was making with saying that. And Mr. Touche can put in a large vessel at the distal end of his property, or he can put a large vessel on the north end of his property. Either way, I mean, we're all allowed to put vessels in the water as long as the beam of the vessel doesn't exceed 25% of the length of the property line.
Eileen?
Okay, look,
It's
he can absolutely do anything he's allowed to do that doesn't require him to come to this board where there's a statute, okay? Statutes are things that are created by government, by legislature. The statute says that for this kind of lift, you need approval, but for that kind of lift, you don't. I'm not on the legislature. I don't know why they did that. I don't really care why they did it. Our job here is to look at the statute and figure out if it complies with the statute. If you don't like the statute, then do it the different way and put your boat in and nobody can complain. I mean, this is otherwise we wouldn't need statutes and we wouldn't need bodies to give the approvals for the statute, and you could just do anything you want. I mean, That makes no sense to me, that
Doug,
the people couldn't complain about another boat. I mean, it just makes no sense.
Doug, I'm going to let you make a comment, and then I think I'll let Mrs. Zacharias, and then after that, I would think we should make a motion to see where we're going.
Okay.
So go ahead, Doug.
Okay. Ms. Zacharias, you talked about boat lifts. If you will take a look in that marina, there are 5 or 6 boat lifts. They are all the same size. It's basically a neighborhood type of marina, which means if the good neighbors, if Mr. Touchette would like to be a good neighbor, he would conform to those heights that are already in the marina, instead of asking for an exception, pissing off his whole community. So take a look at the lifts in that marina and conform. Period.
Go ahead. Zacharias.
Thank you. So just to respond to the gentleman's comment, you heard from your own expert that a 4-foot piling lift would not work. And this is standard practice, 7 feet. I don't know what anybody else has, but your own expert just said 4 feet doesn't work. And again, the height of the pilings are what are before you. So if you're gonna hang your hat on reasonable access, the reason I brought up the issues of alternatives is because I do think it is important to know on the record whether what could be done as a right without this discussion would have more reasonable access, less reasonable access, or equal reasonable access. And what I am putting forward on the record, and again, I've asked for David to speak on this, if we can give him a minute, is that having a large boat at a 75-foot boat, the neighbors would have the same reasonable visual access to the waterway. It is more, nothing less. So if we're going to hang our hat on that, I think it is important to know that reasonable visual access would remain the same. David, can you please speak to that?
Mr. Nutter?
Okay, I think what she's trying to get at is that a 40-foot long boat on a lift would be, can you hear me?
Well, you have to be sworn in. Yeah, I've not been sworn in. You got to get late.
Okay, swear me in.
Let us swear you in.
All right.
And to remind them I'm here.
Can you please raise your right hand? By the authority vested in me as a notary of the state of Florida, do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
What I think Ellie's getting at is that a 40-foot boat on a lift and a 75-foot boat not on a lift, it's going to be supplying the same visual access to the same lack of visual access. Because, you know, the bigger the boat, the higher it is, the wider it is, obviously. And what she was trying to get at is that if we put the boat lift on the other side with the 40-footer and then the 75-footer on the west side, then they're still going to have the same lack of visual access and probably even less lack of navigation, because I'm assuming also that 75-footer, that longer boat is also wider. So I mean, the way Richard was trying to design it was the least amount of navigational obstruction on that west side, with the smaller of the two boats on the left and the larger boat on the north side. And neither boat's going to allow more or less visual access. Navigation wise, the wider boat being wider than the lift that we're putting in is going to obstruct navigation more so than the lift will. A no profile that one board member brought up, again, like he said, that because typically on a no profile, your no profile platform is brought up to the level of the dock. In our design, the lift bunks were brought up 1 foot above that. The no profile is brought up even with the dock, so you can just walk straight onto it. So the boat would only be 1 foot lower than it would be on the lift that we're proposing. So it's the same visual access issue on a no profile. And typically a no profile is also wider by about a foot or two. It may not be on this one because it's an 8-post, but typically they're a foot or two wider. So a floating dock, it would be the same thing. It's a floating dock. The boat might be a little bit lower because the floating dock is right at water level. So it might be 2 or 3 feet lower. It's going to go up and down the water, obviously. I'm not sure if there was anything else you wanted me to address, Ellie.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So if we give you permission for this particular lift, is there only going to always be a 42-foot boat there? Or once you have the permission, any boat can be there that fits on it?
I think, and I haven't discussed this with my client, but you could see his face, and this will be the first time I say it. I think Mr. Touchette could agree to a limitation on the boat size if approved.
Forever? And what if he sold a dock and the next person wanted to put a bigger boat there? Is it a restriction that runs with the land?
It would be something we would agree to. We could record it and it would run with the land. And again, that would be up to Richard.
Okay, I just wanted to know.
Before we, I think at this point, I would like to get an idea, and maybe we should have some sort of motion form, and then I'll let John talk. John, I'll let you talk in a second, but let's.
I have a very short question with a very short answer and not a lot of comment, and I'd like to make it if I may.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Can this boat be lifted out of the water with 4-foot pilings, or it will, if it's a standard 4-foot piling, you will not be able to lift your boat out of the water?
That is what Mr. Jenkins, your reviewer, your expert has said. 4 feet will not work.
However, when you present that you people accepted the 4 foot, am I correct? Your expert at that point, when you requested the original approval was for 4 feet?
No, there was.
I'll address that if you like.
Go ahead.
David.
The original approval, and it was a mistake in our drawings that was brought up in either the last meeting or the meeting before. Your standard 4-foot drawing is for a dock piling. Your standard dock piling goes 4 feet above the decking. Your standard lift piling goes 6 to 7 feet above the decking. So for the simple reason, so that the motor sits on top of it, the lift equipment sits on top, and you can walk under it without banging your head on it. Your standard lift piling is not 4 feet. On the original drawings, and again, this was a mistake on my part when I drew the thing, that I drew the lift piling at the same height as the dock piling because I screwed up. But it was never intended to go in at 4 feet above the decking. It was always intended to go at 6 or 7. But because of the way it was drawn, we're at this 4-foot restriction. But the standard lift piling is not 4 feet. The standard lift piling is 6 to 7.
Mr. Nutter, did you put in those lifts in that marina, any of those lifts in that marina?
Over at Bramer Isles, we put in one. I've been trying to remember the gentleman's name. I think it's Bohan.
Okay, and most of those lifts, they are about 57 to 59 inches.
Okay.
Okay.
Typically, we do it 6 to 7 feet. If it's a small boat, sometimes you can do it lower. But typically, you're doing it so that your average height person can walk underneath the lift equipment.
Okay, can we get a sense of what's going on? Does anybody want to make a motion on how we should handle this? Anybody?
Accept or not accept?
Well, that's the question.
I still need, this is Eric Oldenburg, I still need an answer from Mr. Rubin. Are hands tied either to approve or disapprove this amendment, and that is it? Or can we disapprove and request them to come back with a different plan?
And as I said before, the application is to increase the height of the pilings, and you must either approve or deny that request based on the town code.
Mr. Nutter, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
The drawing on page 112 of the, first of all, you said before it was an 8-post lift. It's actually a 10-post lift.
The original application was for an 8-post with 2 mooring pilings, and then we revised it to make the 2 mooring pilings part of the lift, so it's a 10-post.
Which was approved.
Right. So the drawing that's on page 112 of the package, which shows the lift at 4 feet above the dock, is the reason, just for my own clarification, is the reason why you're looking to raise it from 4 feet to 7 feet is so that somebody can actually walk under the crossbeam?
Typically, that's the reason why they're at that height, and typically that's the height we put them in at all the time. The reason it was drawn at 4 feet was just a mistake on our part when we drew it. It was always intended to go in, the pilings were always intended to go in at 6, 7 feet up.
Is there a crossbeam between one pile and the other that somebody would have to go under, or are there
It's
only
the lift equipment that sits on top of the pilings.
on top of the piling?
Right. You can either put them on top of the pilings, or there's brackets you could use that put them in between the pilings, and that's what we were going to do when we had it at 12 feet up. But when we shortened the pilings, we changed it so that the lift equipment's now going on top.
So the lift equipment is on top, but there's a crossbeam between the two.
No, there's nothing in between the pilings now. It's just the lift equipment sitting on top.
So then a person doesn't have to walk under a pile to get onto the boat.
Under a piling, no.
Under
They're walking under the lift equipment.
Under the crossbeam.
The crossbeam for the lift, the lifting equipment.
So there is a crossbeam between the two piles.
Not between, on top.
On top, which would be as approved at 4 feet. And if you put it at 7 feet, the reason why you're looking to raise it to 7 feet is so somebody can actually get under that crossbeam and not have
Correct. If the pilings were at 4 feet above the decking, you would have 4 feet of space between the decking and the bottom of the lift equipment to squeeze under.
And you can't.
So within that 6, 7 feet, now you have 6 or 7 feet.
You can't have the lift at the 4 feet and not have that crossbeam.
No, the crossbeam is where the cables roll up. It's the bar that rolls up the cable and the motors and all that sits on top of the pilings.
Okay.
And it goes from it sits on one piling to the next piling.
Okay. Sorry, David. Apologize.
No problem.
Okay.
What? Go right ahead.
Okay. A little preface to my motion. I believe in process, and I believe in the fact that this board has an obligation to follow existing statute. I'm sorry that Mr. Nutter made a mistake in his plans, but a previous board approved something based on something that they thought was the package that they were being presented, and they approved it. I don't think that this board can overlay a height difference without going back and reviewing the whole thing, which I'm very happy to do. But I would make a motion to deny the amendment to change the height.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Is there any further discussion? No further discussion. Now, Eileen, one question. That denial, can we condition it that we recommend? Can we put a recommendation on that? That we should go back and review the whole thing? Or-
No,
Yeah, no, it's just denied, and they can come back and.
I would not condition a denial.
Me neither.
Okay, okay,
No, I don't want to do that.
okay.
Motion.
So do we have a second? Is there any, and no further comments by the board? Call the roll.
Member Middleton,
Yeah, yes.
Member DeMoss,
Yes.
Member Brown,
Yes.
Member Adwar,
Harry?
You asking for my vote?
Yes,
No.
wait,
No, no,
we're
no.
The
voting
motion is to deny.
approval. We're voting against approval.
I can't understand what you said.
We're voting against approval, Harry.
So say yes.
We're voting against approval, yes or no?
Against approval.
Against
The mo,
approval.
That's a yes.
Yes, yes.
Make a note that
Okay.
Mr. Adwar has an issue with hearing, and he is
Right.
relaying his yes vote.
okay, thank you. Mr. Bowden,
I vote yes to not allow the amendment.
Vice Chairperson Goldenberg,
Yes.
Chairperson Axelrod,
Yes, with a comment, I think that it behooves Mr. Touchette to go back and maybe with Mrs. Zacharias' position to talk to the neighbors. He has refused to do that. And for that reason, that's why we're here. I think that if he talked to his neighbors, maybe we could resolve this very simply. But
David.
that was recommended by the attorney. And currently I'm voting yes to deny.
Okay.
And I concur with the chairman.
Okay, motion failed
No.
unanimously.
Okay?
Ingrid,
Okay, we're
a
gonna,
question with that. It's denied. Do the pilings stay there?
no.
A building official will now put out another notice of violation. So if it's going to be the duplicate notice of violation that was previously submitted to the applicant, they will have 30 days to remove those pilings. I don't anticipate that the notice of violation will be any different than the prior one, but that will be up to the building official. But you have a denial here, the applicant will have to remove.
Okay.
Excuse me, can I ask something? Can I cut it to 4 feet and build
It's denied, sir. It's
build
been
it
denied.
on the 4 feet?
No, 4 feet is okay. You can let 4 feet, you are allowed based on the original approval with the 10
Right.
posts. That's where we stand. Is that correct, Mr. Rubin?
Yes, just to be clear, the motion to amend the height from 4 feet to 7 feet was denied.
Right.
So you have the 4 feet still.
So I can put the lift on 4 feet.
If you can make it work on 4 feet, yes.
Can I say something?
No, do a
Okay.
discussion on that. Leave it alone. Okay. C, proposed ordinance to delete certain finished floor elevation and general elevation provisions provided in Chapter 30 zoning code and Chapter 6 building and structures of the Town Code of Ordinance. Okay, Ingrid, you want to fill us in on this?
The building official
Oh, I'm
should be
sorry.
on, there
There
he
it
is.
is.
C, proposed ordinance to delete finished floor elevation and general elevation.
What page in the agenda are we on, please?
We're on 428 or 429. The memo starts on 429.
What page is that in the packet?
Yeah, 429 in the packet.
It's past, just past the blueprint.
What page in the packet?
429 is Mr. Remus's memo.
Yeah, it's
Oh, okay. Got it.
429, 430, actually.
Right, it starts at 429, then continues.
Goes, yeah.
Jeff, you can go ahead whenever you're ready.
Okay. Could you hear me? Good, okay. Chapter 30 of the zoning code and chapter 6 of building and structures of the town's code of ordinances currently provide several provisions regarding the finished floor elevations and general elevation requirements. Upon review of this, I noticed there were some problems. I sat down with Ingrid and the staff determined that several of these provisions are redundant, that they are already addressed by the Florida Building Code and or Chapter 20 in Planning Development and Article 6 of the Floodplain Management of the town's Code of Ordinances. In an effort to provide better clarity and efficiency in the town's code, staff proposes the following revisions to the Code of Ordinances as provided in the attached ordinance. Deletions have strike through, and anything that's addition is an underline. We already went in front of the town commission. They seem to be positive about it, and now we're following our process and presenting this to the planning board if you have any questions.
Yeah, just as clarification, the reason it's before this board is because anytime you amend chapter 30, it needs to come before the planning board, which is the zoning code. So even though it's just eliminating redundant provisions from the zoning code, it still has to come before this board.
Question? I'm just, it looks good to me. It's nice to clean up things. But what happens if for some reason, this other code doesn't have this anymore, and then we don't have anything either? Like, what would happen then?
Well, if there were going to be any changes in the Florida building code, we would know in advance, and then we would have time where we would be able to provide some other type of code. I really don't foresee that happening because a lot of what we actually already have has been sitting and is antiquated. As the Florida building code continues to move forward, FEMA continues to move forward with the NFIP and their regulations due to the problems that we see with, flooding.
Okay. So the answer is we would get notified and then could take action if we had to.
Yes, absolutely.
Got it.
And most of it is addressed in the floodplain regulations that's already in the town code. Some of it is in the building code. And as Jeff said, you get years notice of amendments to the building code.
Can I make a motion that we proceed as requested?
Second.
Is there any public comment? I guess not.
I have a question. Jeff, does this change the height of the seawall requirements?
No, the current seawall height requirement is 6 feet above mean sea level, but it's not defining mean sea level. Mean sea level, according to all the current FEMA maps, just happens to line up with the current base flood elevation, which is under the NAVD, which is the current way that we measure. And all we're doing in this case is saying, rather than have to update this all the time, whenever the flood maps change, the requirement for the seawall elevation should change also.
What happens to seawalls that are historically grandfathered in and low? Would they be mandated to be higher, or this is only for new construction?
It's for new construction, and when you go to replace your seawall, repair your seawall, do a cap, as soon as you go to alter your seawall, you're going to have to meet the new height requirement, which is ultimately for the good of the entire island and the entire community, especially Bellito. So
just for my edification, if I wanted to redo my seawall on a home that was built in the 1960s and a lower seawall, to meet the new requirements, how much higher would I have to minimally put it? Is that like 6 inches, a foot, 2 feet?
It varies based on what you have. We have elevations all over the place, so I cannot specifically answer that question. Right now, if you look at the seawall that's being put in over at the Schneid residence at, I think, not 40, anyway, on the south end of Tranquility, that one is going in right at 6 feet NAVD, which will be 1 foot below the finished floor elevation of the home. So you still have a grade that's going out. Now, the flood maps are going to be changing. They were supposed to change. We're going up 2 feet on the ocean side. We're going up 1 foot on the intracoastal side. And in preparation for that, one of the homes that you have already approved, they're actually going to be putting their home at 8 feet NAVD in preparation for that, just to be moving forward, so that again, they're just being proactive, and that's a good thing.
So you're actually approving high, that it goes to 6 feet NAVD. If they want to go to 8 or 9, you're approving that.
We have no restrictions under the current codes. If someone wants to put up a 12-foot wall, and I have nothing, other than if it violates a zoning where, certain walls, but we have no height maximum, no seawall height maximum. And I've taken several phone calls from people who are looking at raising their seawall and asking me what elevation. And when I tell them, they're asking, is it okay if they put it higher because they're tired of their yards being washed out and everything else. But all we're doing with this is, and again, you can just not refer to it and just refer to the current 6 feet NAVD. But right now, the base flood elevation happens to be exactly what was set by the town, and I believe that was by design. So rather than having to constantly update it, just refer to the base flood elevation under the current firm maps, which the current firm maps on the entire west side, it's all at 6 feet NAVD.
All right, thank you.
You got
Jeff, if you go higher than the adjacent property, do you require return? Because you're going to have changes in elevation.
Well, that's going to be a design issue. That's something that we would look at. Most people are putting returns on them anyway for their own protection in case the neighbor lets theirs deteriorate and they don't want to get a washout. So we are starting to see some more returns coming in, but we have no specific requirements. That's an engineering issue. That's not a town requirement issue at this time.
I was just curious because I've addressed this in other cities. I just were curious about the returns.
Yeah.
Smart. If your neighbors are at the same height and then they won't raise their wall, it's just prudent to put in a return.
Yeah, I would agree. Because then it sort of becomes sort of a return wall and if there's a change in elevation between you and your neighbor's property, then it becomes sort of a retaining wall.
Retaining wall, right?
Right.
Let's see if we can have a vote on this. I think we've had to approve, and we've had a second. Can we have a roll call on it, please?
Member Bowden,
Yes.
Member Mendelson,
Yes.
Member Brown,
Yes.
Member DeMoss,
Yes.
Member Adwar.
Just 1 second.
Okay. Member Adwar.
Yes.
Vice Chairperson Goldenberg.
Yes.
Chairperson Axelrod.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, announcements. November 17th, the Town Commission meeting at 1:30 PM. Financial Advisory Board special meeting scheduled for November 19th has been canceled. And November 26th and November 27th, Town Hall will be closed in observance of Thanksgiving.
Chair Axelrod, before you adjourn the meeting, it's Ingrid.
Yeah.
May I just make a little follow-up comment to the board? I did want to follow up with the board on the September 10th, 2020 discussion that you all had about the deficiencies regarding the accessory marine facility provisions of the code. If you recall, there was a consensus from the board that you wanted actual recommendations from the town's consultant, the marine expert, on some of those deficiencies. And based on that consensus from the board, we asked ATM for a work proposal to address these deficiencies. They did submit a work proposal at the cost of $7,000. This proposal was considered by the Town Commission on October 6, 2020. The Town Commission was reluctant to have ATM come on board. However, staff has now been tasked with this item to work on amendments to the accessory marine facilities provisions, again, to address some of the deficiencies. I also wanted to advise the board that Commissioner Bobby is sponsoring this. So staff will be sitting down with the commissioner, and we're going to come up with some amendments to, again, better address some of the deficiencies. Just wanted to give you that update.
Thank you. Before the next time boat lift comes up. Okay, if there's no other business, I will take a motion to adjourn at 11:36. Seconded?
I'll second.
All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Good, motion. Meeting adjourned.